Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. November is ending on quite a cold note, but will that continue to be the case as we go into December and the meteorological winter? As usual, I'll start by taking a look at the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. The animation runs from 18 GMT, Tuesday the 28th. And at the outset, we've got an area of low pressure just to the east of the UK, and there's colder air coming down from the northeast around it. The white shading there indicates sleet and snow showers in the northeast. Now, as I run the animation, what we see is an area of low pressure tracks to the south of the UK and then slips down towards the Bay of Biscay. It was looking for a time as though that would be heading eastwards across the southern part of Britain, bringing a risk of rain, sleet and snow on Thursday and into Friday. That's now not going to be the case, at least according to the computer models. As I continue the animation, what we see is winds continue to come down from the northeast, so it remains cold through the weekend. Showers mostly in coastal counties where they could still be wintry, especially in the north. There's some white shading there over the northern half of Scotland. And then into the early part of next week, not a great deal changes initially, but towards the very end, a ridge of high pressure builds in and it becomes mainly dry. What happens in the days which follow? Well, a lot of uncertainty. I'll look at that a little bit later, but keep an eye on the Atlantic because there are indications of a change beginning to shape up here. That's really illustrated by this animation, which shows essentially pressure patterns through the same period. To begin with, the yellows and oranges there to the north are indicating high pressure, high latitude blocking, with the Atlantic really not finding its gear at the moment. So often the weather in the UK is coming directly off the Atlantic, but here we've got areas of high pressure to the north and to the west. As I run this through the week, what we see is that gradually high pressure to the north does weaken. It becomes more focused to the south of the UK, just towards the very end here. There's a ridge building up from the southwest. So there are signs here just reinforcing that message of a transition towards a more normal and typical weather pattern, perhaps setting itself up for the second week of December. But I will look at that a little bit later because it is very uncertain. Well, it is cold though through the first week. So let's just take a look at a few temperature charts. This shows forecast maximums on Wednesday, single figures across the UK, the lowest values there in the north, but even in the south, 4, 5 or 6 Celsius, so below the average for the time of the year. Forwards to Saturday and looking at overnight lows, a widespread frost here to start the weekend. I think temperatures will be significantly lower than shown on this chart in some locations because it is quite a broad brush. The resolution on this model is not very high, so it won't pick out some of the sort of frost pockets which we get, but it does illustrate the extent of the frost risk, and that's going to be the case on quite a few of the nights through the first week at least. Forwards to Saturday afternoon, temperatures remaining low everywhere, low single figures really, perhaps milder in the southwest there. Devon and Cornwall is probably where the highest temperatures will often be through the first week. Forwards to Tuesday, and this is showing minimums at 03 GMT on Tuesday, so the risk of frost there still widespread into the early part of next week as that ridge of high pressure starts to build in from the west. The ensemble plot here from using the MOGREPS G data shows forecast temperatures at about 1,500 metres above sea level. For London, the thing to note is that all of the lines are very closely aligned until about the 2nd or the 3rd of December. That means good agreement between all the individual runs which comprise the ensemble. So cold, not especially cold. It's important to emphasise that -5 here at 1,500 metres above sea level. It's not in the very cold bucket. For that, we'd want to see the values dipping down towards -10, and none of the runs do. The other takeaway here is that from around the 2nd, the 3rd, the lines are increasingly diverging. That is pointing towards a widening range of outcomes, and confidence begins to fall about how things are going to develop. Rainfall. Usually I show the aggregates for 0 to 5 days first, but I'm going into the 0 to 10 days charts immediately. The one on the left is ECM, the one on the right is from the GFS. Rain in all parts of the UK through the 10-day period. The wettest conditions probably in the west, but not especially high totals anywhere. And of course, the other thing to take on board here is that when I say rainfall, what these are actually showing is precipitation. With all the cold air in the mix, some of that is likely to be falling as sleet or snow. Hence the reason why I've not shown the 0 to 5 day charts, because instead I wanted to bring up these, and they show the forecast snow depths from the GEFS model. The chart on the left is for Sunday the 3rd of December, the one on the right Friday the 8th. Each stamp represents the forecast from one of the runs in the ensemble model, and it's possibly you may want to freeze the video at this point and look at them in some detail, but the important thing to take on board is that accumulating snow is shown to be most likely in the north and the east of UK on both of these. But there are a number of stamps which show snow cover even in parts of southern and central England. So it's mostly in the north and the east where the greatest risk of snow is, but it's not entirely discounted by any means elsewhere. Even parts of southern England could see some falling snow through this period, and accumulations are not out of the question even there. So as we head towards the end of the first week, how do the deterministic models compare with each other? Here is the GFS, Tuesday the 5th of December. Quite a messy picture really. It's still cold at this point, but this high pressure starting to build up from the southwest there. Never a good direction if it's cold weather that you're hoping for in the UK. Here is the Canadian model at the same time, high pressure also building from the south. The German icon model, the high pressure is further southwest, but there are indications here that it's starting to shake things up a little bit. Although it's still cold at this point, it really is on all the models so far. The European ECM also has the high pressure starting to build northeastwards from the southwest. And finally, the UK Met Office Global. This one is different because there's an area of low pressure scuttling across southern Britain. It's not obvious from this, but I have taken a look at the precipitation type charts and the upper air temperatures associated with it, and generally it is shown as rain falling across southern and central counties. There just isn't enough cold air in the tank at this point for snow to fall down to low levels. But it is a long way off, and it's not well supported anyway by the other global models. Something though to keep an eye on perhaps. But taking those together, the suggestion is that cold conditions will be continuing towards the end of the first week, but indications of a change as high pressure starts to build up from the southwest, and that could result in something milder returning through week 2. So with that little teaser there, let's have a look at how things could shape up through the second half of the forecast period. But as ever, remember that at this range, it is all about trends and probabilities, not details. Here is the 16-day GEFS plot for London. Air temperatures across the top to start off with. The thick purple line, the ensemble mean, is below the thick black line, the 30-year average. So it's rather cold, which is what I've been discussing. The likelihood is that temperatures at the start of week 2 will be below the average, but they trend upwards through the first few days. Now, those lines, each one representing one of the forecast runs, are going off at they are really diverging significantly. So there is a wide range of possible outcomes through the second week. It's not a given that it will be turning mild, but on balance, most of these runs are signalling that temperatures, at least at this level, 1,500 meters above our heads, will be returning to the norm or even climbing above it. In terms of rain and, well, snow, I should say as well, Across the bottom, the number of spikes increases, so it's pointing towards a wetter picture as we head through the second week. The snow row along the very bottom there, which gives an indication of how many runs in the ensemble are forecasting snow to fall on a given day, is not climbing above 3, and it can take a maximum value of 33. So a low chance of snow during week 2 in the south if this is right. Here are the 2 metre maximum and minimum temperatures in the data tables for London. Across the top, the maximums. The amount of light green and yellow increases as we go through the second week, so a warming trend. It's worth noting though, some blue appears there later on, 10%, that equates to 3 runs in the ensemble, so the blue means very cold, so there is that low chance of it turning very cold, perhaps winds coming more from an easterly or northeasterly quadrant, but as I say, 10% is all that's been suggested here. Across the bottom, the minimums, the same warming trend is apparent, so the overnight lows picking up, but even so, a lot of dark green and blue continues to appear even towards the end there, and that's indicating that there is that chance of frost remaining a risk even in the south through the second half of each second week, although the overall profile here is for it to be turning milder. As I say, that's not certain, and we could end up with rather dry conditions, possibly. A number of runs have shown that with high pressure influencing things, but even though the air mass aloft is warming up, it could still stay quite cold down at the ground level. But that's not the favoured solution. Up to Manchester, it's a very similar air temperature profile as London. Likewise, across the bottom, the number of rain spikes increases, the snow row values are a tad higher, but not significantly so. 2 metre temperature data tables for Manchester, very similar in terms of the trends. Up to Glasgow, this is a little bit different because the ensemble mean across the top here is staying below the thick black line, the 30-year norm through the second week. So a greater chance of temperatures remaining below the average than in Manchester and London. So as we're heading northwards, a greater possibility of it staying colder. For rain and snow risk along the bottom, the number of spikes increases. There are some quite big ones there. In terms of the snow row, well, values peak at about 10 on the 11th or the 12th of December, so a moderate chance of snow falling. So it fits in with what I'm discussing. There's more scope for snow in the north through the second week, more scope for it to remain colder, but the same general theme has been indicated here, that it will be turning more changeable. The 2 metre temperature data tables for Glasgow, maximums across the top, look rather cold really. There is that warming trend through the second week, but it's not as strong as it was on the charts further south. Likewise, the nighttime values seem quite low even later on, so there is that ongoing chance there of frost. Rainfall, using the ECM probability charts for days 8, 9 and 10, so the first 3 days through the second week. These are showing the percentage chance of over 5 millimetres of rain falling. The first 2 there have a lot of light shading, a low chance, but the third one shows the green and orange increasingly prevalent, the chance of rain, heavy rain, rising. And that same theme really continues through days 4, 5 and 6 through the second week, but the wettest conditions in the west and the north. A signal here for it to be drier in central and eastern England, perhaps fitting in with what I suggested about high pressure having more influence across the southern half of Britain later on. But very uncertain, and the key point really is that it's going to be turning more changeable if the model data is correct. That's the most likely outcome. The 10-day GEFS mean surface level pressure plot, so Friday the 8th of December, indicates low pressure centred to the west of the UK. It's a very, very messy picture here because it's generated by averaging out all of the runs in the ensemble, so I'm not reading too much into it because there is a wide range of solutions, but The greatest chance of colder conditions there in the north. High pressure still perhaps centred to the south when all of the individual runs are averaged out. So let's just take a quick look at the GEFS postage stamps at the same time. These are showing 850 HPA temperatures over the UK on Friday, the 8th of December. Blue indicates cold, yellows and orange, mild, and greens fairly close to the average in general terms. And there is a big spread of outcomes here. The blues are more likely to be covering northern and eastern parts of the UK than southern and western ones. So it's once more indicating that the cold has a greater chance of holding on through the second week in the north and the east of the UK. Really quite typical because the milder air will be approaching from the west or the southwest. The mean surface level pressure data table for York, so going through week 2, quite mixed. There is a signal for pressure to drop through the first few days, more greens and blues, a little bit of purple showing up. Also though, a number of runs are actually bringing in higher pressure, but they are a minority. Towards the end of the second week, perhaps pressure starts to rise once more, at least a signal for it starts to strengthen. But I wouldn't read too much into this. There isn't a strong direction of travel apart from perhaps through the first few days where pressure is shown to be falling, maybe as the Atlantic does start to try and return. Just to finish with a few views of the Northern Hemisphere profile from the deterministic models rather than the ensembles. From the ECM here, Friday the 8th of December, the UK is just there, so we're looking down from above. That's the North Pole right in the centre of the chart somewhere there. High pressure to the south-east of the UK, the cold air going down its eastern flank, and there are indications here that everything's moving eastwards and that high pressure is gradually toppling into southern and eastern Europe. So a southwesterly flow perhaps returning across the UK, hence the chance of milder conditions. Now, with that said, the main action looks to be on the other side of the hemisphere, the deeper areas of low pressure, and it doesn't appear here as though the Atlantic is really going into maximum overdrive, at least not yet. Here's the GFS model, the same view at the same time. Perhaps the Atlantic a bit more active on this one than the ECM. There isn't that signal, or at least not such a strong one for high pressure here to the east of the UK, but it looks like a relatively flat pattern, albeit not a very vigorous Atlantic flow at this stage. And finally, the Canadian model, once more, the main actions would appear to be on the other side of the Northern Hemisphere. So there is some hope there if it's cold weather that you're wishing for as we head through December. The Atlantic doesn't really seem to be getting its act completely together at this stage, but things can change very quickly. It is just something to keep an eye on. If the Atlantic doesn't step up a gear, there is always that chance of colder air coming back from the north or the east. So, to summarise, week 1, cold and often dry with widespread frosts. There is a risk of snow that's highest in the north, the northeast, but it is not discounted elsewhere. Week 2, the favoured scenario is for temperatures to trend back towards the average, especially in southern and central parts of the UK. The cold conditions may well be quite stubborn in the north. That's where it looks like they will be the slowest to break. After a mostly dry start, the chance of rain increases and snow is still possible in the north, particularly, of course, over high ground. And note, there is a chance, and I'm going to give it around 25% based on the data available to me at the time of filming, of it remaining generally colder through the second week. So, there we have it, a wintry start to winter. The indication that it will be turning milder as we head through the second week of the forecast period, but it is not certain. And of course, even if that happens, there are still 2 more weeks to go until Christmas, so the cold could return in time for then. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. As usual, if you did, then please consider hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel if you've not done so already. And of course, stay up to date with the day-to-day weather developments by checking out the TheWeatherOutlook.com website. Thanks very much now. Bye.